Coming up, more back and forth over BEC benefits.
A defense attorney's explanation after his murder-accused client walks.
And a shooting victim fights for his life in hospital. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Lime.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Kendino Knowles. Thanks for joining us.
Topping the news tonight, the head of the Bahamas Electricity Corporation is now advising employees that they'll have to forego more benefits come 2014. The announcement follows a declaration by BEC Chairman Leslie Miller that employees will no longer be able to receive sick pay benefits from both BEC and the National Insurance Board.
BEC Chairman Leslie Miller says workers who have enjoyed free pension and health care for years now will soon have to help pay for those benefits.
If we just say right now that we're going to try to do in January, as early as January, that BEC workers would pay 6%, would contribute 6% to the pension plan, and we would contribute 6%, that's going to save us millions of dollars.
In fact, BEC Chairman Leslie Miller says the corporation alone now pays over $11 million a year into the pension fund. And in the last decade, Mr. Miller says BEC has paid out over $54 million to pensioners. In order to save the corporation money, especially following its $22.5 million loss recorded in the last fiscal year, Mr. Miller says next year employees will be asked to contribute to the fund.
Now, why would a guy at BEC complain about paying 6% on his pension fund and BEC paying 6% when every single entity in this country does the same thing? Why would he complain when 90% of all of the companies, the private companies in this country, pays, if they pay 50% of your medical, you must pay at least 50%. Most companies today send you the NIB.
That said, Mr. Miller says BEC workers will also be asked to help subsidize the cost of their $5 million a year medical insurance by paying at least 25% of the total cost starting January 1st. And by the year 2017, Miller says employees will have to pay at least half.
If they refuse to do so, we will then get the insurance company to reduce their benefits by 25%. These things got to happen. I mean, the whole world has realigned and readjusted themselves to the new reality of the economies all around the world. The Bahamas is no different.
As far as the Bahamas Electrical Workers Union is concerned, what the chairman is proposing will not happen.
He does everything unilaterally. He doesn't respect our contract, and all he is into is what he wants and not what is beneficial to building this corporation.
Are you preparing for any type of industrial action?
For what?
From this? No?
For what?
For this decision that's been made.
For doing what is right on behalf of the people we have industrial action? They can turn off the lights again? Tell them to turn it off there. We can turn off their lights too. You wouldn't come back through that gate. This is a fight to save money for the people of the Bahamas, to enable us to lower the electricity bill, to take this burden off their backs.
Meantime, Labor Minister with responsibility for national insurance, Shane Gibson, says NIB was never intended for individuals to benefit from being off the job. Instead, he says the agency was originally put in place as a salary replacement mechanism. His comments come in light of the dispute between the Bahamas Electricity Corporation and the unions that represent its employees over a recent decision to discontinue the practice of workers collecting sick pay benefits from both BEC and NIB.
I think for a long time, a lot of the government corporations were able to negotiate very lucrative contracts. You know, I was on the other side. I helped to negotiate some really, really lucrative contracts for Broadcasting Corporation, for the telco. And, we realized that back in those times were good. Now times are tough, and so the things that we took for granted back then, we can't take it for granted anymore. I mean, the same way we trying to find new ways to generate new revenue streams, we have to also find ways to try and cut back on expenditure. And so we don't want to take anything away from employees, but at the same time, as employees need to understand that there are times when they just have to give up a little in order to keep the bigger picture going.
Minister Gibson says the idea is not to change terms of employment unilaterally, although President of the Bahamas Electrical Workers Union, Stefano Green, had said previously that Chairman Leslie Miller had unilaterally made the decision.
There's a basic principle in law which states that you cannot unilaterally change people's terms and conditions of employment. And so the thing is, if the country and the corporations are going through a rough time right now, you do, as every other employer would do all around the world, you sit down with the workers or the workers' representatives and you figure out ways to try and see how you could keep your business open. The last thing we want to do, and we will not do, is make individuals redundant. But at the same time, because we've taken a position not to make individuals redundant, then of course we have to look at cutting back on expenses. And so if it means that persons are benefiting more being off sick and being on maternity leave when they're on the job, then the thing to do would be to sit down with the workers' representatives and try to work out a formula when you can phase out that.
An accused murderer walked today after a jury found him not guilty of murder. As Fern Carey reports, the defendant's lawyer claimed it was a classic case of mistaken identity.
23-year-old Jermaine Taylor walked out of court a free man Tuesday after a jury found him not guilty of killing Michael McIntosh in 2011. As Taylor left court, he said simply, quote, "God is good, God is good," end quote. Now, during the one-week trial, prosecutors called 4 witnesses in support of their case. They alleged that 23-year-old McIntosh was walking through a track road in the Young Street area when he was allegedly shot multiple times by Taylor, who approached him and opened fire. The Crown also alleged that Taylor, who died hours later in hospital, gave a dying declaration naming Taylor as his killer. However, the 10-woman, 2-man jury was not convinced and returned a unanimous not guilty verdict, prompting presiding Justice Roy Jones to tell Taylor he was free to go if he did not have any cases pending. Outside court, Taylor's attorney, Terrell Butler, indicated that the case was one of mistaken identity.
The only thing the prosecution had was a statement that they claimed was made by the deceased saying a Jermaine Taylor of DeVoe Street shoot me. He is also called Cupboard. Now, from the evidence that came out in court, it is clear that my client was from Minnie Street and there was no other evidence to identify him as being involved in this matter. And so I'm very happy with the decision of the verdict.
Meantime, Butler said Taylor is now free to get on with his life. Fern Carey, ZNS Network News.
Well, convicted bank robber David Collins appeared in the High Court today appealing his conviction and sentence. You may recall that Collins was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his role in the daring daylight robbery of John Bull on Bay Street last May. His alleged co-conspirator Jonathan Umbrister was sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, during today's proceedings, the court agreed to hear Collins and Umbrister's appeals together. As a result, the matter was adjourned to January 2014. Well, a man remains in serious condition tonight after being shot yesterday. Police say the man in question was at Broome Street when he was approached by a gunman and shot to the upper body. The search continues for that suspect, who police say fled on foot.
In our first look at weather, 25 days remaining in the tropical cyclone season, and it remains quiet this evening. But outside of our studios, we have partly cloudy skies, temperature 80 degrees, your relative humidity 70%, winds out of the east at 12 knots, your barometric pressure 1,015.7 millibars, that's 29.99 inches, and it is steady. But stay tuned, temperatures around the Family Islands, travel and boating forecast is still to come.
Well, still ahead tonight, prisoners free their minds with a focus on art.
And later on, a royal performance for some special musicians. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Shell Helix Ultra. Performance you can see.